Okay, there's something about social media that is absolutely driving me crazy these days. And so I'm going to talk about, let me move this stuff out of the way so I can see the camera. Sorry. Oh, you know what? Real life here as I'm recording this podcast episode, things are in my way. Okay, back to social media is driving me crazy for so many reasons, but I'm going to talk about just one of them and kind of, then go into some other things. But here's part of what's making me nuts and why I feel like I have to have this honest kind of heart to heart with you today. So, women who I work with, women in midlife, right? I say women over 40, over 50. Most of the women I have conversations with and who enroll in a program with me, whether that's one-on-one mentorship, a variety of different ways that women work with me. The women I work with, for the most part, are in their 50s. Sometimes they're in their 60s, sometimes they're in their 40s. I've even worked with women in their 30s, but let's just say women in midlife. Women at this stage of life are already, we're navigating one of the most confusing transitions ever. I've said it before. It's more confusing than being a teenager. It's more confusing than becoming a parent. It is more confusing than any other stage of life for women, right? These are women, we are women whose bodies are changing. Our our physical bodies are changing in many different ways. Most women are gaining some weight at different extremes. Maybe it's just a few pounds, but sometimes it's 10, 20, 40, 50 pounds. So physically, your physique is changing. Your shape is changing, not just your weight. Your sleep is changing. Your energy is doing all kinds of crazy stuff. We are having more aches and pains. We are we're noticing a difference in how our body feels and looks from maybe just 5 years ago, even. Definitely a drastic difference from 10, 15, 20 years ago, right? But not only physically are we changing, emotionally and psychologically, there are actual changes going on. It's not just, oh, all in your head that you feel more anxious or you feel somewhat depressed or sad, or that your emotions go up and down sometimes without seemingly any trigger at all. That's not just in your head. There is science to show and research to prove that this transition, perimenopause into menopause and postmenopause, is not just a physical transformation, it's a cognitive, psychological, emotional transformation too. Basically, every freaking system that makes you up, who you are, and how you function is impacted. And so your confidence feels different, your libido has been impacted. For some women it's completely disappeared. Your stress maybe has gone through the roof. Work changes, your professional life, not just your personal life, but your professional life changes because our careers are typically also at the same time that we're going through this midlife, our careers are typically at a point where there are a variety of ways that that is changing too. And so work can become more demanding, it can become more frustrating. Maybe you're getting disillusioned with work for a variety of different reasons. Your parents are aging, and many of the women I work with have been put in a position to become caregivers. And that makes life confusing and brings up all kinds of conflicting issues. Your kids are getting older, and so they need you differently, or maybe it feels like they don't need you at all. Life is just different. And oftentimes that different can make it feel heavier, right? So it's confusing, it's heavier. There's just a lot going on. Now, then you go, like so many of us do these days, you go and you open social media. And oftentimes you might do that for some entertainment, but a lot of women I talk to go looking for answers on social media. And here's where I get to the roundabout way of getting to why I say social media is freaking driving me crazy. Because you go to social media for answers to all of this confusion. And on one side, you're told your weight doesn't matter. Love yourself for who you are and how you look and in the body and skin that you have. Love yourself the way you are, right? This sort of self love movement. On the other side, on the other hand, you're in social media and you hear sort of this this whole other lane on social media where you hear things like you just have to be more disciplined. You need to eat less and move more. That's all there is to losing weight. I don't care what how old you are. You need to get your macros calculated and then count them. If you want it badly enough, you'll do it. And frankly, sometimes I look at this crap on social media, and I'm going to define what I mean by crap because I'm not saying that everything about both sides of those examples is wrong, but I'm getting to a point here. I think I look at social media and it makes me think we've lost our freaking minds because neither, and here's what's wrong with both sides of those, both arguments, right? Neither one of those messages reflects the reality of what most women, the women I talk with, it doesn't reflect the reality of what most women are actually living at this stage in life. So listen, I am never going to tell you that your worth depends on the number that you see on the scale when you step on it. I know what that feels like to believe that. I know what it feels like to equate your worth to the number on the scale. And I know it, when I say that, a lot of you are going to hear that and you're going to go, well, of course, my worth doesn't depend on the number on the scale. But I know exactly what it feels like to believe that it does. Pause a second, squirrel. I say I know what it feels like to think that my weight is determined by, or my worth is determined by the number on the scale. But at the same time that I believed that, I would have verbally told you that it didn't. Okay. So I think that disclaimer is important as we have this conversation. So again, I'm not going to tell you that your worth is determined by that number on the scale, but I know what it feels like to live in existence where that is exactly what you believe. I spent years believing that, even though I wouldn't have admitted it again, right? Saying, I want to make sure I say that. I spent years thinking that my weight determined if I was succeeding at my diet or failing at my diet, because I was always on a diet. So that's a given, right? That number on the scale, and I stepped on it every single morning like a religious practice, right? Like it was something that I had to do just like breathing. In fact, I stepped on that scale multiple times a day, every single day. And that number in my head was the same as, or it determined if I believed that I was doing well or if I was not doing well. It determined if I was proud of myself or I was disappointed in myself. In fact, I can honestly say that the number on the scale in the morning, because every single morning as soon as I got up, that was one of the first things I did. I went to the bathroom and I stepped on the scale. And the only reason that I went to the bathroom first was because I knew that if I went to the bathroom first, it might make the number go down a little bit. But every morning, I can honestly tell you that number determined how I felt at the start of my day. It determined the emotion that set me off on my way. If it was down, I was happy. If the number was up, I was either angry or frustrated or sad or disappointed or defeated. Eh, Any number of those emotions could be what I felt that day based on that number on the scale and whatever else was going on, right? So I know what living with that mindset feels like, and I know what it costs too. So again, I'm never, ever, ever going to talk about weight, give advice about weight or how to lose it, or write content or do podcast episodes or write article. I'm never, ever, ever going to do anything that sends the message intentionally anyway that your worth depends on your weight. Never, ever, ever. That's not me. But I am also never, ever, ever going to pretend that your weight doesn't matter if it matters to you. If you don't feel comfortable in your own body, if you have clothes in your closet that you've stopped wearing because you can't fit in them and you love those clothes, if you are less confident, if you don't have the energy that you used to have, if you're worried about your health, if you're thinking about playing with your grandkids 5 years, 10 years, this year, and you're worried about your weight impacting your ability to be active with those grandkids, then your weight matters. And again, not because it is the equivalent to the value you hold. It's not. But in those instances, your weight is connected to something that you value very much. So it matters. And I think that we have gotten, I won't say lazy, but I'm going to say I think we've gotten really irresponsible with that conversation online. And that's why social media is driving me crazy. And I felt like I needed to record this conversation today for you. I have coached, mentored women for years and years. In fact, long before I ever had this actual formal full-time business mentoring women, I've coached women for decades. And even before I was working formally in this health and wellness, more focused industry, women would tell me, like, I don't want another diet. I don't want another quick fix. I know that diets are temporary. And especially since I've been doing this full time and I've been working specifically in these areas with women at this transitional stage of life, women will say, like, I don't want just another temporary quick fix fad diet. They will say, I want this to become my lifestyle. I want to lose the weight and I want to keep it off this time. And when women tell me that, I believe them. I do not think that they are lying to me. I don't. I think they genuinely want something that will last. They want something that's doable. They want something that's sustainable. They want results that are sustainable. And they know that to get lasting results, they've got to have something that they can continue to do. They have to have a lifestyle change, right? And so they tell me that and they believe that. But then something happens that is super interesting to me. Um, and I saw this over and over and over when I started working in this business, helping women full time with this. It really became a pattern that I saw and realized was such a pattern, right? Here's what happens. Here's the pattern. The same women who tell me they want a lifestyle change and not just a diet, okay? They'll have a pretty good week. They will, and by pretty good, here's what they think is pretty good. They will get their workouts in. They'll eat well, they'll eat healthy, they'll eat on track, they'll eat if they're working with me in a one-on-one capacity in my mentorship. They'll eat according to the nutrition approach that I have designed for them. They will drink their water. They'll make healthier, better choices in a lot of ways, right? Then check-in day comes that week and they step on the scale because that is one of the measurements that we use. So it's part of their check-in. Yeah, so they'll step on the scale after having that quote unquote good week. I put air quotes around it. And the number that they see on that scale determines if they think they had a successful week or they had an unsuccessful week. If they were a success for that week or they were a failure for that week. Now, think about that for a minute. If your entire week, you had a quote unquote good week, and you step on the scale, and your entire week is judged by that number that you see on the scale, have you really stopped dieting? Have you really stopped dieting? Now, let me really beat this horse to death here. This will happen with women I'm working with sometimes who have said, remember, they've said, I don't want to diet. I know that it's more than just about my weight. I want to lose weight, but I know the number on the scale isn't the only important part of my progress. They'll have a good week and they'll step on the scale, and maybe the scale went up zero point 0.2 pounds, 0.2 of a pound. I no joke, this has happened. And they will determine their success for the week or failure for the week based on that number. If that number is what you use to judge your entire week, have you stopped dieting? That question again. Have you stopped clinging to diet, a diet, the right diet, the perfect diet? Have you stopped clinging to that as the answer to your problems? Or have you just kind of changed the language you're using? Because that's not what I described. Stepping on the scale, seeing an increase, and that number, well, stepping on the scale and that number, whether it's good or bad, quote unquote, determining success or failure for you. If you're doing that, either way, that's not a lifestyle. That is still letting the scale be the judge, the jury, the executioner, all of it of your progress. It is. And here's what fascinates me, flabbergasts me, but I've come to really understand on a deep level. Here's what fascinates me. Women who do this know better. They know better. You ask, you ask any, go out and do this research project. You ask any woman in her 50s, does sleep matter? She will tell you yes. Ask whether hormones matter. Again, she's going to say yes. Do do I don't know, does rest and recovery matter? Of course it does. Most women already know all of these things intellectually, right? But when the scale doesn't move, it's amazing how quickly the knowledge just jumps out of their head. It just disappears from consideration because and the only questions become, what did I eat? Um, did I do my workouts hard enough? Did I do all of them? Do I need, and these are the things that sometimes when this happens, women, especially when they first start working with me, these are the questions they'll ask me. Do I need to eat fewer carbs, Lori? Should I cut my calories? Should I be tracking this way or that way? It's almost like everything we know about physiology gets pushed to the side because that scale didn't cooperate. That tells me something. It tells me that we don't actually evaluate our progress by everything that we say we evaluate our progress by. We don't actually determine if we're making progress toward our goals based on everything that we say matters. We're saying one thing, but we're still believing something different. We are still evaluating ourselves like we're on a diet. And that is a huge problem because shit just doesn't work that way in midlife. Your body does not work that way in midlife. Now, I could make an argument that it doesn't actually work that way for the 30-year-olds. But even if your body did work that way when you were 30, it doesn't work that, or if you thought that it did, it doesn't work that way now. You cannot say stress matters and then completely ignore it when you're evaluating why the scale behaved the way it did. You can't say that recovery matters and then only judge yourself by the number of calories that you ate and how many minutes you worked out. You can't say hormones matter and then act shocked if your body doesn't respond the way it did at 35 and you're 58. If if we truly believe those things matter, then they have to matter in the way we measure progress too. And that is, I know it's a huge shift, but that is the shift. That is one of the foundational shifts if you are truly going to win the weight war. If you're truly going to win this health journey, this battle, whatever analogy you want to use. It's not about learning that sleep matters. You already know that. The actual shift is believing it enough to stop acting like food and exercise are the only things that count. And I really do believe that's why so many women have such a difficult time not only losing weight to begin with, but keeping it off in midlife, especially. And it's why so many women have this feeling like nothing works. They continue to feel stuck in the same old rinse and repeat cycle of diet, maybe lose a little bit of weight if they're lucky at this point, then gain it back after they go off the diet. That's why. It's not about a lack of information because even women who get the quote unquote right information, like I said, women who are working with me, who are getting an accurate strategy to use at this stage in life, some of them even still have to make this shift. They still have to go through the process. It's part of what the mentorship does when I work with women. It's not, I don't, when I work with women, I don't just tell them what to eat and how to exercise for their metabolism and their body and their age and their hormone. Like, I don't just tell them that. This is a mentorship. And I've started using that word to describe it instead of coaching because it truly is a mentorship in a very comprehensive way. Because information and strategy that's appropriate for your body is not enough to make that lasting change. Because if you're still using an old scorecard to judge a completely different body in a completely different season of life, you're never, I hate to, I'm not trying to be Debbie Downer, but you're never going to get there. So if you take anything from this discussion in this episode today, please let it be this. I will never, ever, ever tell you that your worth depends on that scale. And I hope you are not in a place right now where you're thinking that. But I'll also never pretend your weight doesn't matter, and neither should you if it matters to you. But what I do hope is that you will start asking yourself different questions. Instead of focusing on why the scale, only focusing on why the scale didn't move. Instead of only focusing on why the scale didn't move, maybe think about, am I actually measuring success in a way that actually matches the life I'm trying to build, the health and the body that I want to create for myself? Because if your goal really is a healthy lifestyle, if you truly want to learn and live a healthy lifestyle in this second half of life, that question, that second question, can change way more than a diet or the number on the scale ever could change for you. So that's one of the reasons I'm so frustrated with social media right now. And I really hope you'll take this conversation to heart and think about, bottom line, are you just saying that weight doesn't matter that much? I really want to be healthy. I really want to be active. I really want to be able to play with my grandkids. Or are you still living in a diet mindset, being held hostage by the scale and what it shows you every morning, what it says to you every morning? Are you still actually looking for the magical diet that's going to get you there? Have you just kind of changed the language so you you're saying the things that you think you're supposed to say? It's food for thought. I'd love to talk to you about it if you want to share with me, how this kind of hit home for you or didn't, or like if you want to argue with me, go ahead. I'd love to hear that. But even if you don't reach out to me to share your story or how you're feeling or what this conversation made you think, even if you don't reach out to me, I hope that you think about the message that I tried to get across to you today in this conversation. So thank you for being here. As always, I appreciate your time. I appreciate the opportunity to have these discussions with you, and I'll see you right back here next time.